folks, this is Mrs. Landak lecturing on section 1.5a. Today we're going to look at bisect a segment. Today and tomorrow we'll look at bisect an angle. If you can't see this up here, you could also refer to your book on page 34 in your text. And the word midpoint is already located on your vocabulary sheet. So if you get the vocabulary sheet, you can add the words to the definition. A midpoint is the point that divides or bisects a segment into two congruent parts. So if I draw a picture, such as segment AB, and I locate the midpoint, it should be in the middle, such that it creates two congruent parts. And to locate the two congruent parts, we usually put tick marks. That means that AM is congruent to MB. Now, if I can also know the reverse, if I know that AM is congruent to MB, then M must be the midpoint. Bisect. To bisect a segment or an angle means to divide it into two congruent parts. And so if I were to share my licorice, I would have to locate the midpoint so that my friend and I would not be gypped. We would have the same amount of licorice, and I would then have to snap it or cut it or take something and karate chop it at M, and then I would get AM and my friend would get MB, and we would have the same amount of licorice. So we have equal parts. Segment bisector. A segment bisector is a segment, ray, line, or plane that intersects a segment at its midpoint. So I'm going to redraw a segment here, and I'll call it again A and B, and I'll locate M, and I will put tick marks there. And I can have several things bisect this. I'm going to have line L, because it's going through the midpoint. That means L is a bisector. I can have a segment, CD. It's going through the midpoint. It can also be called a bisector. I could have a ray, TM, be a bisector. So a bisector, I could say line L, put that down here, line L bisects AB at M. I can also say CD bisects, cuts in half, AB at M. And I also could say that ray, TA, ray TA bisects AB at M. So you can also have a plane go through at any angle at M, and it still would create two equal parts. So a segment bisector has, and we can write here, infinite bisectors. You can already see that I drew in 3. You can use your Barney imagination to see many other things. Just go through M. That is called the bisector. Kind of say it's like your karate chop. Take your hand and karate chop it through at any angle. Then you have created two equal parts. One for you and a piece of licorice for your friend. And the midpoint formula. Midpoint formula, I'd like you to add to the sentence, is the midpoint formula is a formula used to find or locate the midpoint or an endpoint. So add that to that sentence that you had there. The midpoint formula is a formula used to find the midpoint of a segment or endpoint. Now if we look at the other side of this, we're going to look at how to write out the formula. And the first one, as I have right here, is the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula, this is called x sub m, y sub m, and this is just more or less taking the mean. You learned another word for mean is average, and we learned that in statistics means the middle number. And so if we take the average or the mean of the x components of A or B, that will be locate the midpoint for the x value, and we take the mean of the y values, that will locate the y value of the midpoint. And I call it x sub m goes with this formula, and y sub m goes with this formula. And that x sub m, y sub m. So you want to add that in there, and these are the formulas to produce your midpoint. The next one tells us two things. It tells us what the endpoints are, and it says find the coordinates of the endpoints, find the coordinates of the midpoint of segment AB with endpoints A and B. Use the midpoint formula. So I'm going to switch over to this other sheet here, and we're going to use the midpoint formula. Oh, that's not too good, so we'll just go back to this one. As you can see here, I have on my midpoint formula, I have the x's right here, if you locate the x's. And so it's negative 3 plus 5 divided by 2. And if I take the y values, it is negative 4 and 5 plus 5 divided by 2. So we're finding the mean of the x's and the mean of the y's. So that produces 2 over 2, comma, a half. But 2 over 2 can be written as 1, and because anything over itself is 1. So you can locate it if you graph it. You can go right 1 up a half, and there is x sub m, y sub m. Now, that's the easy one, called finding the midpoint given the endpoints. But how about if you know this? Given one endpoint, the midpoint, find the other endpoint. So you can see in the picture here that we know J and we know M. We just don't know the other endpoint. So we plug it into the formula. And I will now change over. This will be a better view for you guys. I will now plug this into the formula. So what do we know? We do know this, and we don't know that. Those are the two that we take the average of. So that's why we write negative 3 plus x divided by 2, and we do know what the answer is. The answer is 1. For the y's, we do know that the y is 2, and we don't know the other y, but we do know that the y value for the midpoint is 4. Now, in algebra, you had to get rid of the 2's. How to get rid of the 2's that you learned is to multiply each side by 2. Then that will go to 1 on the left side, and we multiply this by 2 here. Cross that out, and you're left with negative 3 plus x equals 2. Add 3, and you're given x equals 5. Here, you then multiply each side by 2. Y, to get rid of the denominator on the left side, we get 2 plus y equals 8. We subtract 2 on both sides, and we get 6. So we do know that the other endpoint is 5, 6. So when you get to check the next one, when you get to checkpoint 1 and checkpoint 2, checkpoint 1 is like example 1, and checkpoint 2 is like example 2. You can find the answer in class with the substitute teacher or with me. Thank you very much, class. Hope to see you soon.